There was something about that press club speech that was made by Treasurer Jim Chalmers yesterday that I think should worry anyone who's worked hard in their life, put away a little something for their retirement and something for their kids in pretty tough times. And it's this. He used the speech to talk about tax reform.
Now, no sensible progress can be made on productivity, resilience or budget sustainability without proper consideration of more tax reform. I don't just accept that, I welcome that.
OK, we all accept that is needed in a heavily taxed country that crushes ambition and punishes anyone who dares to do well. Chalmers again promised he would go after unrealised profits inside super for anyone who's lucky enough to have $3 million or more, and the $3 million level will stay at that level, with Chalmers ruling out any indexation. But what should really worry any of you watching this tonight who didn't see that speech, and not many people watch the press club speeches, is how come this was not part of the election debate, which happened 6 weeks ago? We all know the answer to that question. Why scare the horses with tax talk? Get re-elected first and then have the conversation. And just how is this now urgent tax reform going to be worked out? Well, a good old round table. Only problem is the table is too small for anything other than a selective group of likely fellow travellers, you know, Treasury, some cabinet members, a few token business leaders, plus, of course, the union movement will be there. Now, good luck with that. Chalmers also said yesterday net zero will threaten revenue streams, admitting we're about to blow up one of our few advantages in Australia. He left the door open to a GST increase again, hidden during the campaign, never talked about it, and tossed in the idea, this is a beauty, of charging EV car owners for driving on the roads, after Labor, of course, encouraged everyone to go out and buy one. Let's bring in, as I said, David Pearl, former Treasury Assistant Secretary. David, thank you very much for your time. First, what stood out to you from the Treasurer's speech at the press club yesterday?
Thanks for having me on, Steve. I thought your interpretation was spot on, but what really struck me, having worked in Treasury for 20 years, is that this speech was Jim Chalmers' attempt to avoid the hospital pass that the Prime Minister has thrown him last week when the Prime Minister said that he'd asked the Treasurer to host this round table. It's clear that this is likely to go pear-shaped for all sorts of reasons, not least the one you mentioned, Steve, that this wasn't canvassed at all during the election campaign. So what Jim Chalmers did in his speech, and all insiders and all Treasury people would know this, is avoid any possibility that he will get the blame if this goes pear-shaped. One, he disclaimed any responsibility at all, Steve, from our current productivity crisis, which his and his government policies have been integral to. Two, he reframed the round table to be about budget sustainability, which in Treasury speak is code for higher taxes. In fact, when the Treasurer defends the indefensible, his proposed paper profits tax on high superannuation balances, he says it's needed for budget sustainability reasons. And third, he has made the ridiculous rule that anyone offering any idea has to propose offsetting savings. That guarantees that you won't get any consensus in support of any big ideas. Reform needs political leadership. We saw that with Peter Costello. We saw that with Paul Keating, at least the good Paul Keating we had 20 years ago. Jim Chalmers is not a leader. He's nominally Treasurer, but I'm not aware, Steve, of any political risk or example of political courage he has ever shown. And he wants consensus served up to him on a platter by the media, by all of the stakeholders, by the unions, by business, so that he can then claim the credit for it.
So, David, Treasury's convinced the Chalmers and the Labor government, well, almost 2 years ago now, to attack people with more than $3 million in their super funds. I mean, I think on that question, if there wasn't the unrealised profits aspect to it, probably people could wear it. So we can give that a tick. It's going to happen probably. But what worries me, and I don't want to scare anyone watching us tonight, David, but you would well know that the Treasury boffins will be doing the numbers now on where you go next. What's the next, what they would call low-hanging fruit in the taxation area? Where do you suspect that's going to be?
Well, you're right, Steve. Treasury 20 years ago, the Treasury I joined in 1999, is a completely different beast to the Treasury today. Treasury's been taken over by what I call progressive economic ideologues. Traditionally, Treasury was the department in government. So traditionally, Treasury was the department in government that always urged ministers to cut taxes, to deregulate the economy, and to means test and target spending. The modern Treasury, for the last 15 to 20 years, does the opposite. So yes, Treasury is a revenue department. Treasury is keen to raise the tax burden on the community. And don't take my word for it, a succession of recent Treasury secretaries, with the exception of John Fraser, have all given speeches saying that we have to chase the NDIS and other unsustainable spending with higher taxes. So yes, they would be developing plans. The unrealised principle is an appalling one, Steve. It has to be a precedent for wider efforts. I know that Jim Chalmers has not ruled that out. I don't know whether he's been asked a direct question whether the idea of taxing unrealised gains, if it's so wonderful for people in superannuation, why don't we apply it to investors in residential real estate?
Well, that's always been the fear, and Australians really would not wear that. And that's, again, another reason, David, why none of this was talked about during the election campaign, let alone the prospect of raising the GST. Now, that's a whole different question. But Chalmers took us down a strange road. He's talked about overhauling the tax system, but he talks about ditching traditional revenue streams as the government transitions to renewables. Well, that's talking about the royalties that the country gets from mining things like coal, isn't it?
It is. And if we talk about productivity in this country, we have to talk about net zero. I was in the OECD in the late 1990s, Steve, when Australia and other countries first started talking about cutting emissions to deal with climate change. And back then, it was always recognised that it imposed heavy, crushing economic costs. And countries haggled over what share of the global effort they would bear. So now we're told that net zero, the idea of energy poverty, raising energy costs and energy austerity, is the key to high living standards. No, net zero is a drag on productivity. It reduces living standards and it's undermining our manufacturing and revenue base. So I think that Chalmers talking about charging EV users for roads is quite beside the point. The key problem is net zero. I'm not saying that there are broader reforms that we need to tackle to lift productivity in this country, but net zero is self-imposed, and any rationale for it has been blown out of the window with the US, China, India and Russia not playing ball. The only justification, Steve, as you know, for us to wear this economic hair shirt was to do it in lockstep with everybody else around the world. That clearly isn't the case. And even Tony Blair, who Labor people should be listening to, has realised that truth.
100%, David Pearl. Thank you very much for your time and your wisdom tonight.